Welcome to Saint Miracle. He's known as the patron saint of animals and nature, but get ready to discover a whole new side of Saint Francis of Assisi. We're going on a deep dive into his life and legacy. You might be surprised by what you discover.
It's true, there's so much more to him than meets the eye. When you think of St. Francis, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Well, for me, it's definitely the animals. The image of him preaching to birds is just so iconic.
That's a great place to start. His connection with nature was truly profound, but we'll get to that in a bit. First, I think it's important to understand the full scope of his impact. We're talking about a man who left an indelible mark on the church, society, art, literature, you name it.
Okay, so let's broaden the picture. What are some other key aspects of his story that you think are essential for understanding who he was?
Well, for one, his life was filled with miracles. Some truly extraordinary, others more subtle, but all pointing to his deep connection with the divine. There's the famous stigmata, of course, but did you know he's also credited with healing the sick, casting out demons, and even making peace with the wolf that was terrorizing a town?
Wait, hold on, Wolf. Now you've got my attention. We're going to have to unpack that one for sure. But before we get lost in the specifics, let's step back for a moment. You mentioned he was born into a wealthy family, but ultimately chose a life of poverty. That's a pretty radical shift, isn't it?
It is, and that's a crucial part of his story. He wasn't born a saint, He had a taste for the good life, enjoyed music, and poetry, even had a bit of a rebellious streak in his youth. But then a series of events, a war, a serious illness, and what some say was a pivotal dream, led him on a completely different path.
So he goes from a life of luxury to embracing poverty. What sparked that transformation? Was there one defining moment, or was it more of a gradual evolution?
That's a fascinating question, and one we'll delve into as we explore his early life. You see, Francis's journey wasn't about a sudden overnight change. It was a process, a gradual awakening to a deeper calling. He began to experience a profound spiritual pull, even having visions that led him to question everything he thought he knew about himself and the world.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. It sounds like there's a lot more to St. Francis than the simple, gentle figure we often see depicted.
Yeah.
There's depth, complexity, even a bit of mystery.
Absolutely, and that's what makes him so compelling. He wasn't just a holy man living in isolation, he was engaged with the world, challenged societal norms, and ultimately sparked a movement that continues to inspire millions today.
So for our listeners who are just tuning in, what can they expect from this deep dive? What are some of the key themes and questions we'll be exploring?
We'll uncover the events that shaped his path from his rebellious youth to his radical embrace of poverty. We'll explore his profound connection with nature, his role as a peacemaker, and of course delve into those captivating miracles like taming the wolf of Gubbio and preaching to the birds.
Wow, this is already sounding like an incredible journey. And I have to admit, I'm particularly interested in hearing more about those miracles. Are they just stories, or is there something more to them?
That's the question, isn't it? And that's what we're here to explore. We'll look at the historical accounts, the symbolism, the impact these stories had on people's lives, and who knows, we might even uncover some hidden meanings and deeper truths along the way.
This is going to be fascinating. I can't wait to dig in.
Well, then let's begin. Let's journey back to 12th century Italy and meet the man who would become known as Saint Francis of Assisi.
Okay, let's go. We'll start with his early life before the miracles and the fame. What was he like as a young man? Was there anything that hinted at the extraordinary path he would take? Hashtag TTS, the Deep Dive episode 2024-1210, part 2 of 3.
So to answer your question, young Francis was a bit of a contradiction. On one hand, he was charismatic, loved music, poetry, and indulging in the finer things. He even had a stint as a soldier. On the other hand, he was also deeply sensitive, prone to introspection, and felt a growing disconnect between the extravagant life he was leading and the yearning for something more meaningful that was stirring within him.
It sounds like those conflicting desires must have created quite a bit of inner turmoil.
Absolutely. Imagine being surrounded by wealth and opportunity, yet feeling a growing emptiness, a sense that there must be something more to life than material possessions and fleeting pleasures. That seems to be the heart of Francis's early struggle.
So how did he navigate that tension? Did he just suppress those deeper longings, or did he actively seek answers?
He definitely sought answers. He started spending more time in prayer and solitude, venturing out to quiet chapels and secluded spots in nature. It was during one of these solitary walks that he encountered a leper, a figure often shunned and feared in medieval society. Instead of turning away, Francis felt a surge of compassion and embraced the leper, sharing his food and offering comfort.
That's such a powerful image. A wealthy young man overcoming his own discomfort and prejudice to reach out to someone in need. It seems like that encounter could have been a turning point for him.
Many believe it was. It's seen as a pivotal moment where Francis begins to understand that true joy and fulfillment come not from accumulating wealth or status, but from serving others and embracing those society often casts aside.
And this was all before he officially founded the Franciscan order, right? He was already living out his values in a very real and radical way.
Exactly. This wasn't just about theoretical ideas or abstract theological concepts for Francis. He was driven by a deep inner conviction to live the gospel message authentically, to embody the teachings of Christ in every aspect of his life.
But how did he go from individual acts of charity to establishing a whole new religious order? There must have been more to it than that.
There was indeed. The story goes that while praying in a dilapidated chapel, Francis heard a voice urging him to repair my house. He initially took this literally, selling some of his father's cloth to fund the chapel's restoration. But as he continued to wrestle with his calling, the deeper meaning of that message unfolded.
So it was a literal and metaphorical call to action.
Precisely. He realized that repairing God's house meant more than just fixing physical structures. It meant rebuilding the church itself, stripping away the excesses, and returning to a life of simplicity, poverty, and service modeled after Christ and his apostles. And that's exactly what he set out to do.
It's an incredible story of transformation, of listening to that inner voice and then having the courage to act on it, even if it meant challenging the status quo and defying societal expectations. It makes you wonder, how did his family react to all of this? They must have been shocked and confused, to say the least.
Oh, they were absolutely bewildered. Imagine their reaction when their son, who had everything, suddenly renounces his wealth and inheritance, embraces a life of poverty, and starts preaching in the streets. His father even tried to have him declared legally incompetent.
Wow, talk about a family feud. So how did he manage to win them over, or at least get them to accept his choices?
He didn't really try to win them over, at least not in the conventional sense. He simply continued to live his truth, radiating a joy and peace that couldn't be denied, even amidst the challenges and conflicts. Eventually, his father softened his stance, recognizing the genuineness of his son's calling.
It's almost like his actions spoke louder than any words he could have uttered. He was embodying the very message he preached, and that authenticity must have been incredibly powerful.
Exactly. It wasn't just about what he said, it was about how he lived. And that's what drew people to him.
Yeah.
They saw in Francis a reflection of the gospel message in action, a living example of what it truly meant to follow Christ.
So from those early solitary experiences to his growing circle of followers, it seems like the stage was set for the founding of the Franciscan order.
It was. But it wasn't a smooth or straightforward path. There were challenges, setbacks, even moments of doubt and uncertainty. But Francis persisted, driven by that unwavering belief in his mission and guided by his profound love for God and all of creation.
And that love for creation, that's what leads us to those incredible stories of him preaching to birds, taming wolves, and seeing all creatures as his brothers and sisters.
It does, and that's where things start to get really fascinating, because those stories aren't just charming anecdotes. They reveal a profound shift in how we view our relationship with the natural world.
Okay, now I'm even more intrigued. This is where I want to go next. Let's dive into Francis's connection with nature and explore those captivating stories that have captured the imagination for centuries.
Let's do it. We'll journey into the heart of the Franciscan vision, where the lines between humanity and nature blur, and where all creatures, great and small, are seen as part of a sacred, interconnected web of life. #PTS, the Deep Dive episode 2024-1210, part 3 of 3.
All right, let's talk about these stories, the ones that really paint a picture of Saint Francis as the nature whisperer, the guy who could talk to birds and tame wild wolves. No, it's not like fables.
You know, they do have a certain fairy tale quality to them, don't they? But I think what makes them so enduring is that they point to something deeper, a way of seeing the world that challenges our modern assumptions about humanity's place in the grand scheme of things.
Okay, so let's break down a couple of these stories. Let's start with the one that always captures my imagination, the Wolf of Gubbio. How does a man known for his gentleness make peace with a fearsome predator?
Well, the story goes that this wolf was terrorizing the town, attacking livestock and even people. Fear had gripped the entire community, and they were desperate for a solution. Francis, hearing of their plight, decided to intervene.
So he just walked right into the wolf's den. Wasn't he afraid?
According to the accounts, he wasn't. He approached the wolf with a calm confidence, not as a conqueror, but as an equal. He saw in the wolf not a monster, but a creature driven by its own needs and instincts. He spoke to it, reasoning with it, even making a pact with the animal.
A pact with a wolf. That sounds incredible. What were the terms of this agreement?
Francis promised the wolf that the townspeople would provide it with food if it, in return, ceased its attacks and lived in peace. And the amazing thing is, the wolf agreed. It stopped terrorizing the town and lived peacefully among the people for years afterward.
That's just wild. But what does this story really tell us beyond the entertainment value? What's the deeper message here?
I think it speaks to Francis's profound belief in the interconnectedness of all creation. He saw a kinship with the wolf, recognizing its inherent goodness even amidst its destructive behavior. He approached it not with fear or aggression, but with compassion and understanding. And in doing so, he found a way to restore harmony, not through dominance, but through mutual respect and cooperation.
That's a powerful message, especially in a world where we often see ourselves as separate from nature, even superior to it. Francis's approach was so different, so radical in its simplicity.
It was, and that same spirit is evident in the story of him preaching to the birds. Imagine this scene. Francis is walking through the countryside and encounters a flock of birds. Instead of being startled, they gather around him, chirping and fluttering about.
Okay, I have to admit, picturing that scene makes me smile. It's so whimsical, so full of wonder.
It is. And Francis, seeing this as a sign from God, begins preaching to the birds, praising their beauty, their freedom, their role in God's creation. He urges them to praise their Creator and to live in harmony with one another.
He really did see all creatures as his brothers and sisters, didn't he? It wasn't just a poetic sentiment, it was a lived reality for her.
Absolutely. He believed that all creatures, from the smallest bird to the fiercest wolf, shared in God's love and deserved our respect and compassion. This wasn't just about being nice to animals, it was a fundamental shift in perspective, a recognition of the sacredness of all life.
So how do these stories and Francis's broader vision of creation inform the legacy he left behind? How did they shape the Franciscan order and its impact on the world?
Well, the Franciscans became known for their humility, their service to the poor and marginalized, and their deep reverence for nature. They established hospitals, shelters, and schools, always emphasizing a simple lifestyle and a connection to the natural world. Francis's teachings inspired countless works of art, literature, and music, shaping our understanding of spirituality and our relationship with creation for centuries to come.
It's an incredible legacy. From a wealthy young man wrestling with his conscience to a global movement that continues to champion peace, justice, and environmental stewardship. It makes you think, what would it look like to embody that Franciscan spirit in our own lives today?
That's the question I hope our listeners are pondering right now. What small act of kindness can we offer today? How can we cultivate a deeper sense of connection with nature and all living beings? How can we live with more simplicity, humility, and compassion inspired by the example of Saint Francis?
These are questions worth reflecting on for sure. And as we wrap up our deep dive into the extraordinary life of Saint Francis, we leave you with this invitation to carry a bit of his spirit with you, to see the world through his eyes, and to find your own unique way to make a positive impact on the world.
May his message of love, peace, and interconnectedness continue to inspire and guide us today and always.